template, and so I'm gonna.
I started the recording.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Jim. And I should probably, well, I want to take notes as well. This is going to be interesting. Let me open up another instance of this so I can show you this and take notes at the same time. So bear with me here.
I mean, in most cases, we found that taking notes right in the agenda is the easiest thing. As we go through the agenda, we just take the notes right in place.
Yeah, well, and this is, I've got the agenda up, but in order for me to show you what's on the agenda and make notes, I got to have two copies of the same document open. So it's actually one document. I just have two versions, or it's still the same document. So, but yeah, good point. Okay, so and I found this template in one of the other folders. I thought it was kind of neat, so I just kind of leveraged it. So stakeholders for this meeting, current dApp developers, so that's all of us. Implied stakeholders, situational. Wait a minute, what's that? That's not. No, that's not what I wanted to say. So potential current and potential stakeholders, maybe something like that. Possible outcomes, status updates, and progress reports on current initiatives. Okay. So CoLab development priorities. So lots been going on, and maybe Jim and Gary. So under CoLab priorities, and we had kind of a discussion yesterday on this as far as Keybase and Discord, but Jim and Gary, why don't you give Ned an update on all of your work in Keybase and how that's going?
Sure. Basically we started developing the Keybase robot on Keybase, and I'm using Bash interface with Keybase, and it turns out to be very, very simple. And I tested that with my Gym account, and
so are you writing that in Rolang?
No, no. The Rolang is
it's a Rolang interpreter.
Oops.
Hey, Adi.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Adi.
So basically, I'm using command line Keybase. So this is just a Bash program where I'm reading the Keybase chat, and if I find a Rolang thing, I execute a Rolang. So this is very basic Rolang. And it creates a log of Keybase activity, and then there's a
where do you connect to an R node?
Right here. It's just command line, so it's
yeah, I'm just having trouble seeing the colors.
Simply take the Rolang that they enter and put it into a file, and then I do an R-node eval
Oh, there you go. Okay.
of the file.
Cool.
And then I have the bridge thing where you can bridge a Discord channel and a Keybase channel here. And then
Hey, Rao.
Got it. All right, that looks good.
and then the only other thing is oops, the other side of it, I get the Keybase stuff from Keybase and from the Keybase log, and then I can I have a Keybase 2 channel that gets that where it will log the Keybase information. So what I found is that we can have multiple users on robot.net. So so anybody can run their own bots on the robot.net machine and play with them. And of course, there's the robash, which is the technique that I'm using that I use for these with the bash. And of course, there's a very nice JavaScript API for which I had open. Don't have it open. For doing the pure JavaScript applications. The bash, the row bash, I'm looking at adding some row line features to bash, or supporting some row line features in bash, but that's a longer term. I haven't spent much time on doing that yet. The command, using the bash to create interfaces is just a quick and dirty way of doing interfaces, and I'd like to support the robot features and connect the identities between RChain, Discord, and Keybase. The idea of having personal bots seems like it's going to work much easier with Keybase and with Discord. And that's something that people can look into, but it's very straightforward. In each Linux account, you can log into a different Keybase user. So you can have a robot user, and you can have a Jim Scarver user to act as me, and bot users to act as utilities for multiple people. I didn't make much progress on the voting. Hopefully, we'll have some Thomas Lovewood's going to come in and do some coaching. At this point, I think I've got enough Rolang knowledge to get the stuff working that we have in place. And it's still pretty much at the same point of we're testing and polishing the procedures for a person to request request membership in the community, for an admin to add them to the voting community, and then adding issues and voting on issues, tallying the results. Just
Cool.
adding convenience macros to make it simple commands for each of the steps involved is the main thing that needs to be done at this point.
Cool. Thanks, Jim. Gary, did you have anything to add as far as what's all been going on with Keybase development?
No, Jim did a good job of talking about what's going on over there. I've spent my time playing with Keybase and trying to understand how it works and how we might make use of the tools over there. It just keeps looking better and better to me. I think we ought to consider encouraging people to get accounts over there and start using it, and we ought to consider it as our main base. But I don't really think that's going to happen. But those are my thoughts about it.
Sure. And I did read through the discussions you had in the JJ Bickering. You had mentioned you put together an introduction for people to join Keybase.
Yeah, we're kind of working on an onboarding script.
Yeah, so I saw that, read through that. So maybe that's over the next couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, we can work through that, and that'll be, having something that we can post to current Discord members and then futures. So when they sign up for Discord, they get this auto reply, say, hey, think about joining Keybase and everything you can do with that. So good. So let me share my screen here. So and the efforts with the Keybase is going to allow for transactions and documents, allow for secure transactions and document signatures. So as we get to RChain gets to mainnet, having a tool available in the early stages is going to be nice, and we're thinking that Keybase might be able to provide us with some functionality until there's more robust development on RChain. So and then the other development initiative going on is the Discord voting, and that ultimately is, so we have the RChain membership meeting coming up in October, and there'll be various items of business which will be presented to the membership that the membership will vote on. So Gary, Jim, and myself, we were discussing this the other day, that in Discord, Jim's has made a lot of progress in setting up the voting, but whether that voting functionality will be up and running and available by October for RChain to use may or may not happen. So and I'm not sure, it's been brought up by Greg, I think, once or twice in either the membership, the Wednesday meetings, and I'm not sure if what Ian's thoughts are, but it may. I'd be interested. I just hope that they're not. I think Ian is going to work on, or I think Jim mentioned the other day that there's they're working on a voting method to use for the membership meeting and the days rolling up. So they're not going to be, it's not going to be the voting method that Jim's working on as the primary. That's going to be an alternative, perhaps. But I'm not quite clear on what the other thinking is, with Greg and with Ian. So during the Casper stand-up on Monday, I may ask that question to Greg, or actually the best person is Ian. What I'll do is I'll send a message through Discord to Ian asking him, hey, with the membership meeting coming up in October, what are your plans for voting? Have you given it thought? I know Jim's been working on a voting method. You're not relying on that to be the voting method, are you? So I'll get a clarification on that. So
I don't think anybody's relying on it.
No.
Now, Rob may have some input on that. But here's the thing, on the one hand, Greg has said he really wants, blockchain voting.
Right.
Very strong about it.
Okay.
On the other hand, I don't think anyone's working on it but me right now.
Okay.
I do hope to get some, other people involved. The other question is, well, do we want to have a Discord interface to it or some other interface? And to some extent, the functionality that I'm building could have any kind of interface, but somebody would have to develop an alternate interface. The interface I'm working on is through Discord.
And that's where most of the RChain co-op members are in Discord.
Right.
So, okay.
So now last time we used these guys netvote, I guess netvote govern combination. Is it the case? I guess they're now out of the picture for this year. I don't know. I guess we would ask Ian.
My understanding is that they've moved on.
Yeah.
The last thing that Ian mentioned was, I had mentioned live survey, and he said that he liked that option, and he was looking at line survey.
Which one you're talking about? The work you're doing?
No, this is separate. Line survey is an open source survey tool that can do voting.
Okay. Can you put a link here, Jim, in the chat?
Yeah, you should talk to Ian because we were just talking about using monkeys, Survey Monkey. So
right.
You should reach out before you do any work. You should reach out to Ian and just to make sure you guys are on the same page.
Right. So the other question, though, is even the long term for this work, what you're doing here, what is the, I mean, how much effort does it take to get this to be usable voting?
Really not a lot. I'm just, looking for other people to get engaged in maintaining it besides myself. I mean, I got one.
And Jim could probably do it in a week, but as we get closer to the general meeting, he's going to be pulled every which direction, and so we need some people to take over some of these projects that are essential, like voting, and get them moving. But right now he's just hitting about 12 different topics a week, and he can only spend an hour or two on any one of them.
Right. I mean, basically, I guess there is also the question of use cases, right? How RChain's board elections go is a use case, but there may be other use cases for how voting is done, or there are different patterns to it. And I mean, I guess you could do one at a time, but my question is the architecture such that you could add more and more use cases or patterns of voting
Oh, sure.
to it, or is that going to be a problem?
No, I think it's a generalized voting mechanism.
So I have to ask the question. This is done either through Discord or Keybase, and it's fronting some Rolang contracts, right? Smart contracts. So who's going to pay for those smart contract deployments once you guys get out of testnet and you're up and running on mainnet? Because every deploy is going to cost rev. So where is that rev going to come from?
I don't know, but I would think that the deployment of this contract, will be insignificant.
It's still going to cost. You're still going to need rev.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out, are you going to require each member when they vote to put in their wallet address when the contract is executed?
Well, no, if we do it on Keybase, we've got their identity. We don't need anything.
Yeah, but I thought you were using a Rolang smart contract.
Right.
So every time you deploy a smart contract, you have to pay rev. It's just like Ethereum. Every time you do anything with your Ethereum wallet, you have to pay gas.
We could eat the cost on our side. I think we pull the complexity out of it. The voters shouldn't have to pay.
So what I would recommend, you got to wait for the dev team to finish the cost accounting, but you probably should talk to Kelly and estimate what your cost for deployment is going to be, and then multiply that by the number of members who are going to be voting. And so you're going to know how much funding in your rev wallet you're going to need.
Yeah, the whole signatures and cost stuff has to be added. That there's right now it's still using Dan's toy keys for identities.
So I'm surprised it's working, right? Because I thought there was an update, not this 2 or 3 updates ago, where you could no longer, you needed, you were no longer given like monopoly tokens during the Genesis ceremony. And now you actually have to have some kind of real rock, which you could get, I think Kelly can give you some, but, right? So have you not updated? So what version of our node are you running against?
Good question. I mean, it's not it's
not updated for a while.
It's not updated for a little while.
Okay, so that's a big point. So you probably don't want to update it until you've talked to Kelly and gotten some fake rock or something.
Oh, okay. So what I'll do, in addition to talking to Ian, I'll reach out to Kelly to get oriented as far as what the cost accounting would be for a voting smart contract. And so at least we can start that into the discussion.
We're running 0.93 right now.
9.3. Okay, we just released 9.9.8 or something.
Yeah.
9.10.
9.10. Yeah.
Yep, we're up to 9.10.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want you guys to be aware of that, right? So.
Yeah, these are. That's the value of having these meetings, is to tease out some of these smaller details, which were actually big details in the end.
Right,
So.
and so now you could actually put although I think there was a bug, so I'm not sure it's fixed yet, you can put the wallet address in a file. So before this feature was added, you actually on the command line had to put in your wallet address, which means that anybody looking at your command line, you know, if you had it in like a file and ran it, your private key would be exposed. So now they added a feature where you could put that private key in another file and just reference that file from your command deploy, right? However, there was a bug in it, and I think it's fixed now, but that's another thing you should check with Kelly. It's probably just going through, you know, how to spin up our node and deploy contracts. It's probably in that updated document that Kelly uses for testnet Thursdays.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's probably specified in there, and I think the bug was fixed because, you know, when people are going to vote, I mean, you're going to have to figure out the interface, right? When I say vote, blah, and that calls into your contract, then your contract's going to need to be smart enough to deploy that Rolang and to have your wallet address available with the private key so it could actually deploy and register that on the blockchain.
Now, with the Keybase, I guess you could keep that wallet address in your Keybase file, or how does that work?
Well, you know, there's a lot of ifs there. I mean, you know, if you're going to run a shared robot, okay, it would manage the private keys. So that would have to be run in a secure environment. And
yeah, you don't want people knowing that private key.
Yeah. So the alternative is that each person would run their own robot, which with the Keybase stuff, I mean, we found that, you know, I mean, Gary can run the stuff on his Windows machine. We're running it on, you know, so it can be run on pretty much any machine. And if a person's running their own bots, there really doesn't need to be they don't have to. There doesn't have to be a trusted bot that keeps keeps people's keys.
So here's an interesting point. You're going to need multiple environments. So you're going to need development, test, and production. And in development and test, you're going to want to somehow be able to use fake Monopoly Rock or Rev.
Right.
And in production, you're going to need to use real Rev. I'm just going to call it Rev from now on, even though we know Rev's not here yet, right? So that workflow you're going to need to keep in mind as you're developing. You're not going to want to blow through real Rev while you're developing and testing all this stuff out, which is interesting. And yeah, and right now our node itself, you're running just in a private standalone, or are you connecting to the testnet R node? No, you can't because you're on an older version, so you're running. Okay.
Yeah, right now we're running the Colab standalone, right?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Ned. Those are all good points to be thinking about. So let's see.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys are working through it, because when we get real dApp developers, these issues are all going to be what they're going to have to deal with.
Exactly.
So.
Okay. So I have here review membership call to action. So this is the document that we've been working on as kind of getting our overall plan and scope for what we want the dApp developer working group to be. And so we were filling out, last week we were filling out the list of current projects that people are working on on RChain, and I found Lumet project. He's I couldn't think of it at the time, but it's dApp. So dApp is a web application distribution network that has no unique or central point access or failure. Blockchain nodes behave like a web application cloud provider. They distribute web applications and maintain a record of named blockchain addresses. So we've got that on there. And then, of course, the RChain API that Joshi and Dan had developed.
So can I say something about that?
Okay, go ahead.
So as some of you know, the RChain API doesn't work right now because of the protobuf issue. So which is basically data structures that need to be in sync between the API and what's on the our node side.
Okay.
And those have been out of date for quite some time. So I reached out to, so Joshi doesn't want to do any more work on RChain and the API, and I reached out to Dan, and he pretty much rebuffed and said he doesn't really find it interesting, and he's not really keen on working on any RChain API work.
Okay.
So now I don't know if that's something somebody in the collab could take on and update that. I don't think there's funding, so we'd have to talk about, I don't want to do a bounty program, but if there's people who can do the work, if you can maybe write up a cost estimate of what it would take, and then I could go to, Greg and whatever staff we have left, and we could discuss, basically it would be Greg and Bill, and see if we can find some funding, because that is going to have to be updated.
Yeah. Thomas Love is going to do some coaching. Unfortunately, he said he really isn't going to be able to do it this month. So he isn't. That would mean next month, and hopefully he would have, when next month comes around, he isn't going to say, put it off for another month. But I've definitely been looking for a coach, and we have a little bit of collab sponsorship to get someone started. And if we could go down the road of trying to cover this coaching process, that would be good.
Well, I'm not so much concerned, Jim, with coaching. I just need somebody who can do this, right? I mean, coaching is great, and I'm all for it, but we need to get this RChain API working. And, we're second week of July, and mainnet is coming, and we can't expect dApp develop. And actually, Eric, who some of you know as Dimworm, but I'm going to call him Eric because he's now on the board. He said he has 23 plus Chinese developers, but one thing he called out to me was RChain API isn't working.
All right. Now, somebody has developed an alternative to the RChain API, and unfortunately, I lost the method. There was a link in Discord.
That wasn't done by Jack Mills, was it?
I don't remember.
Yeah, because Jack Mills had been hired by Pyrofex to work on documentation, but he was also coming up, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a different method than using the gRPC to call into the API. Does that sound familiar? I can't totally remember.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't follow up on it. I mean,
okay.
Discord doesn't really have a way of flagging things and coming back to them later.
I know. So, all right. Anyway, so we need to get this RChain API working if we're going to expect dApp developers to embrace our platform, right?
So is that just a matter of fixing and maintaining it to work with the newer versions of the code, or is there actually newer design and additional stuff that needs to be done?
I think for now, it's really the former, is just getting it where it works with the latest release of our node. And yeah.
Which is why I think that, with some coaching, well, we don't have, we also need people to be coached, which we don't have either.
Right.
But,
do you want? So I was thinking if you put out a call in the collab, and somebody could come up with a quote, hey, this is going to take me 40 hours, and we come up with a billable rate, and I could see if we have funding.
Yeah.
So if anybody knows anyone in the community, I mean, I kind of don't want it to be a free-for-all. Usually I'd look at resumes or somebody vouching that somebody has a skill set to do this. So it's such a crucial piece to our game plan.
I mean, Chris says, using the command line stuff should be fine. It should have full functionality. But I'd really like to get the RChain API stuff in robot working again someday.
Yeah, I mean, we need people to be able to do this from JavaScript.
Right. Yeah.
We can't interest the Chinese community in Bash scripts for a while until we get the API working. I mean, we could do everything that they could do.
But how would they do that from a JavaScript front end? Right. I want to build a dApp, so I have this web interface. I don't want to use the command line, and I don't probably want to run Bash scripts. Yeah, I want a RESTful API that I could call from my JavaScript.
Well, I mean, JavaScript obviously can call command line stuff. So it can be fairly transparent to the programmer as to how whether it's done through, exec calls to our node or through some other means. True. But yeah, I agree totally that it would be, it would be good. Now, as of a few weeks ago, because of more changes that were happening, Chris B was suggesting we stick with the command line version for a little while until everything gets flushed out in terms of the changes that are going on. But
which will happen quick.
The certain things like the gRPC structure and things like that could be fixed. And I guess the remaining things had to do with the signatures and the encryption, which were in flux at the time, although I think they may be stable again at this point.
So, okay, well, we'll reach out to Tomislav to see what his availability is for either coaching or for any API development updating.
Excuse me, Steve.
Yeah.
While you were saying that, it just occurred to me. Have you talked to either Tomislav or What's that other gentleman's name that comes to the Roland meetings?
Isaac? Jay?
Isaac could do it. I don't know why he doesn't do some of that stuff.
And Jay? Jay? Is it Jay Saloff?
Yeah, Jay could do it.
Do you have, if you send me their Discord IDs, I could reach out to them.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll send you a message with all of the people that I feel could do what you want them to do. I can't do it. I would burden the team just asking questions if they let me in the room. But yeah, those guys could do it.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Okay. And so just a quick announcement, and maybe this would be more for Jim since he's local to the Tampa Bay area. Pocket, sometime in July, they're having a meetup on how to set up a Pocket node. So apparently there's an interface, a Pocket interface that already connects with RChain, which has been developed. And the Pocket, if you recall, that was they're that link to getting a mobile app connected to a blockchain platform. So Jim, if you're interested, I'll once I find out the date, I'll let you know to see if you're available and if that's something you're interested in attending. So okay, so we're moving through our list, and so the next item is developer template. I know, Ned, we had talked about the two of us getting together and having you kind of educate me on what your thoughts are on a developer template would be, and maybe we can have that as an agenda item for a future working group session. What are your thoughts on that? On having that as a topic for an hour in some week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure what you're looking for. There are lots of different ways we can approach that.
Okay. So is there sort of a generic methodology that's for developers, or that's just not the case and it's always going to be very project specific?
No, there's a lot of different methodologies. I mean, if you're talking about driving the project and functional requirements, you could follow Agile or Scrum. If you're talking, okay, now I have my user story, how do I code it? What do I need to do to write the code itself?
Well, actually, maybe that would be sort of a precursor of what are some of the various methodologies that you have to consider before you pick and identify what type of template you want to go with.
So who's the audience?
It's us. It's everybody on the call.
So is this the person who's going to actually be writing the code, or is this the person who is going to create the user stories so the person writing the code knows what to write?
Well, so I'm not me personally, I'm not, I haven't done any development, so I need to get oriented on these types of things. So
right, but you're not going to write code. Okay. So because basically everything I just said, each one could be a 20,000 page guide, right? And, I mean, we generally put this under the heading of SDLC, Software Development Lifecycle.
Okay.
And you can take that all the way back to somebody creating a project charter and having to present that project charter to a PMO, a project management office, and getting approval to even move ahead. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the kernel, the seed of the idea. And you flow that usually through, functional requirements, business requirements, functional requirements, risk analysis. I mean, this is like PMP, project management, right? So this is.
Well, I think, I mean, what we could, because if you go back, then there is the business model, right? Before you put your project management chart or as part of that, you need to have your business model. So, but without getting too far back into that loop where it becomes generic, I guess maybe we should focus on things to say, okay, once you have an idea, how do you bring it into RChain? What are the things you need to do? Is there anything in terms of how you write your user stories, you need to think differently because it's going to be developed in RChain?
So what I would say, Ro, is that piece is like 8 steps into the process. Because if you're doing the SDLC correctly, you're not even talking about how you're going to implement that until you even know what it is you want.
Right. Yeah. So I guess, but whatever we need to do, what I'm thinking is that if we can quickly refer to sources that are already out there to say, okay, well, if you need a methodology, you look at this. If you need a project management charter, you look at this, because PMP folks have already a whole bunch of templates and all that.
Yep.
But then what we need to look at is what needs to be done differently within there, because they're going to develop in RChain, right? If that bridge, if there is any difference, we need to do that bridge bridge that gap if there is anything. In some cases, it may not matter. But in some cases it might. For example, in the business model area, there's a whole lot of things they need to figure out on their own for their business model, but then there is a link to RChain finances and our financial model and how that's going to impact what they do to a degree. So we just talk about that aspect of it to say, when you're thinking about this, your business model, here are the considerations from an RChain perspective.
Yeah.
Likewise, if you're thinking about your project, here are the team considerations from an RChain perspective. You want somebody with these skills, or you want to allow for this, and you want to have a development environment like this, and a test environment, whatever else, right? The kind of things we were talking about earlier in terms of what should they be planning for in the development environment, in the test environment, in terms of the fake rock and the real rock and all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in each area, there are things that are specific to RChain. And I think if we just address that, and for the generic stuff, we refer to the standard resources. It's, in my mind, a complete enough document. Otherwise, we'll basically be recreating a whole lot of knowledge that's out there in the world.
Yeah. So,
and like you said, it'll become a 20,000 book for each part of that.
Right. And everybody has a different opinion on how they want to do it. So I agree. It's like, so is that okay, Steve, that we can just, drill down into where, we have to have an assumption that people are coming knowing how to develop software. Now, I'm happy to coach them. Mm-hmm. And like when I talk to a lot of the reflective partners, a lot of them had great ideas, but it didn't even know how to do software development. And that's okay. But to me, that's like a different
gotcha
discussion with those people. But it's like, if somebody knows what they're doing, now when they enter the RChain world, what are the things they have to be on the lookout for, and may have to do things a little differently than they're used to?
So should we call this more of a resource guide, or how do we want to coin this particular topic that we want to kind of cultivate?
Well, I like what Rahul said, how to develop on the RChain platform.
Okay, so we'll call that.
Like, the object capability model. People may not be familiar with that.
Right. What's formal verification?
I'm sorry?
What is formal verification?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we could come up with a bullet point of items that are different.
Right. Basically the concepts that are specific to or different from RChain, and or somehow dovetail into considerations for what they would normally do, whether it's a business model or whether it's a project plan or team planning or whatever it is that they're doing. For example, I was just reading the cheat sheet for RChain that Josh put together, and I'm thinking, that's very nice to start with. But if there's also a glossary that goes with it, that kind of explains the terms of RChain, I think that will be a more complete package.
There isn't, and we definitely need that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because when we talk about things, we really need a glossary. Even to understand the cheat sheet, you need to have a sense of, okay, this is what it is. If you're within the RChain world, that becomes obvious. But for a newcomer, we need the glossary.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, there's so much materials that we need to support the devs. Just lack of funding has kept us from putting any of that together.
Okay, well, this is a good start. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ralph.
No, I was going to say, so how is the documentation project being run right now? Is Steve running it, or you guys running it? Or
there is no documentation. There's no money.
Okay.
So Kelly has requested for quite a few months now to get a technical writer, and the operations group staff we have also been pushing. But you can't get water from a rock, because I think we would need 2 at least technical writers, and one has to be really senior. And this is definitely a blocker because it's hard to, we want to go out and,
Yeah. I mean, there's no way you're going to have an ecosystem developed without these things, because once you let it out there, 1,000 people are going to ask you the same question. So you need to at least be able to point them to documents and triage that.
And they have to be first rate, because they're going to go and look at the Ethereum consensus and every other of our competitors who has the 8x10 glossy images. And they're going to say, "Hey, shit, that these guys can't even give me any, a PDF." So
absolutely,
yeah.
Okay, so.
But we can get started, Steve. So next week I have jury duty. I'm not sure if I'm going to get called, and so I may not be here next week. But maybe you could set something up for the following week.
Okay, so I guess maybe as an exercise, if everyone could write down what resources, what is your go-to resource for, so you have, starting from the very beginning, higher overview, business model, all the way down to writing code. There's a lot that goes on in between. What are your resources that when you get, you have questions or you get stuck, where do you go to look for answers? And maybe just put it into, I'm trying to think where we have to figure out where to put this, but I'll be the curator. So I'll gather this, and so we'll have, there's as many people there's as many opinions. So everyone's going to have a different methodology, different points of view, different opinions on this, but we've got to start somewhere. But we're going to collect this information, and then we'll kind of go through it, and then we'll come to some sorts of a consensus as far as what do we want. Stack Overview. There you go. Stack Overflow. Right. So we only maybe need just 2 words. Just say Stack Overflow. But you kind of, hopefully, you see where I'm going with this, is being able to, if we can, we're not technical writers, but we can at least kind of put something together that's a start. And I think everything that we're kind of doing here is, it's a start to kind of get the ball rolling. It's ultimately, it'll get revamped and revised in the future when the time comes. But, at least the person who does that, they'll have something to work with. And that's what we're kind of creating here. We're creating just breaking ground, the foundation. So, so let's see, I guess if you have, so any resources or any thoughts on that topic, just just send them to me in Discord, Steve Henley in Discord. So I'll gather those through and we'll since Ned won't be with us next week, we'll still have a meeting, and so we can talk about this informally. So we've got 2 weeks to kind of gather the various resources that developers use and project managers use and architects use to kind of work through their challenges, and then we'll put something together. So how does everyone think about that?
Yeah, I think it's great.
All right, so it's 4:59 right now. Does anyone have any final thoughts?
I was, thinking that, in putting something together like that, I mean, we might consider putting stuff right into the Rolang.org wiki.
There you go. So
on dApp development, and tools and things.
Thank you, Jim. I think maybe that'll be the place where these types of documents will live.
Yeah,
so
we could, in the dApp developers channel in Discord, we can collect ideas, and then somebody can put them. They can be consolidated into the document.
Oh, okay. There you go. So instead of sending them to me, put them into the dApp developers on Discord, either on RChain. Yeah, we'll put it in. Jim, do you prefer, I guess, RChain or the collab? I guess since this is.
Well, I guess what's our channel on the RChain Discord? Developers or members? Yeah, it certainly should put something in members. But I guess for us active people, I think the collab dApp developers channel is probably most convenient.
Okay.
And if we use that, like in my case, if I watch what y'all are doing, maybe I'll get an idea of where we're going with this. But
there we go.
Well,
I'm good at imitating, but not with original thoughts too often.
So dApp developers on Discord or development on RChain. So put your ideas in there, and then we'll go from there.
Cool. All right, guys. I actually got to run, so.
Okay. Thanks, Ned, for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Great meeting.
See you, Ned. I have a question. Who is maintaining Rolang.org?
Joshi created it, but no one is overseeing it. So, that's something that I've been wanting to add to, but it's a matter of finding time. So it's just a community effort at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. And I spoke with Joshi, and he's more than open for people to come in and maintain it. So he likes that idea.
He's hoping that, he wants to turn it over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is it the case with Joshi that he's generally not interested in Rolang too much at this point in time, or is it more of a...
He's not interested in RChain because of Greg. I don't know if I should have put that on the recording, but I think that's the truth.
You could cut off the recording if you want, because past the hour. But no, but he was participating in meetings as late as last week. That's why I'm asking. Was it just that one task that Ned was asking him about that he was not interested in, or was he saying that he's not interested in anything?
Yeah, I would think it's more of the former. It's just this task. He doesn't want to. I would think it's that, just this task. He's still very optimistic about Rolang.
Okay.
But, it's just the mismanagement that's going on and the.
Yeah, I was hoping to engage him in the hardening type of effort to see if we can, because we need to write some random programs to to test the system to see to observe its failure behavior.
That would be something that Robot can do real well.
Right. That's what Jim was saying, that Jim actually volunteered you for that, Gary.
I love spamming things.
Because what I was going to talk to Kelly about is potentially creating a separate test net, because if quote unquote any dApp developers are using the current test net, they might want continuity and not have their blockchain data break between versions. But we probably want a dev test net, where we announce people that this is only for people who don't mind the system crashing every so often, so to speak, where we actually don't do the behaviors that bring down the test net or bring down the nodes in a graceful manner on the test net. Instead, we let it be and then just run some wild programs against that and see what happens and see what resources or bottlenecks and what kind of behaviors we're seeing in the code, so that developers have the data to then say, look at it and say what they need to fix. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I have not pursued with Kelly about that space. I don't know what it takes to create a separate dev test environment.
I think this random thing is a really major effort. You know, in my view, to make anything useful out of it. And I mean, sure, I mean, Gary could do some could generate a bunch of random programs, and we could run them on against the system, and it could crash. But you know, it's going to leave us like, huh? You know, it's not going to give us any information.
No, right. So step one is how much effort does it take to put up that separate dev test? And then if we run the random programs, then what you're talking about is, well, then we need to somebody needs to look at the logs and make sense of what is happening, right? To understand the behavior. So there are tools, hopefully like Splunk, that can be run against those logs to make some sense of it. That's the next step. That's what I'm hoping, is that some kind of AI-driven tools can do the heap analysis, log analysis, and all that kind of stuff, and at least give you patterns of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, we've run our own networks here, you know, a year ago. I mean, you get a few people together that can generate a network, and you know, if they know what they're doing, in an hour or so. You know, we did it in Berlin. We did it in, you know, we've done it in collab sessions before that. But, you know, now it's a little different. So generating, I mean, just getting the random programs to run on a standalone version in any useful way is a major thing in my view. I mean, if you can make, you know, if you can do it, just run a local R node and run standard programs on it and use that in any sensible way to harden it, then you would worry about running a test net, running it on a test net. But no, I'm not sure how to get past that first thing. Just, you know, I understand how Gary can generate random programs for you, but then what? You know,
so are you suggesting that we don't even need to necessarily do the dev test net, but we just need a dev test node against which Gary can run the programs, and then somehow we communicate the heap results and the log results over to the dev team? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know how you can make the running random programs useful. That's the part I don't know. Okay.
No, I'm not looking for usefulness as much as robustness, that it does not crash when you throw something at it, right? The only goal, only initial goal, is to see if it'll still stand up if you throw something unexpected at it.
Right. Well,
or expected, either way, but.
Yeah, well, until we have the cost accounting and things run out of gas, anything that loops is going to bring the system down ultimately. So anytime you have an infinite loop, you're going to crash the system.
No. See, this is where the dev test node is different from the test net. Whether it is cost accounting or people running out of gas being a protective mechanism, or resource constraining
I'm just talking about, you know, half the programs he's generated are going to generate are just going to loop infinitely. They're never going to terminate. Okay, they're going to eventually use up all the resources, and the machine's going to die. Okay, so
let's do this.
One is you want it to die gracefully, or you want it. You're not going to make it never die if it's an infinite. If it's doing infinite stuff. You're going to run out of resources eventually.
Right. So, so I guess let me ask you: would you modify the proposal in some way to be more useful in your mind? Would you say do this instead, and that may be more useful?
I'm not sure how to make it useful. I mean, I understand how it would be useful in I think that rather than random programs, we need
constrained programs, meaning like programs that are constrained to be correct. So there are, I don't know if everybody, I mean, if everybody has the time, there is a thing on GitHub called Yet Another Program Generator. I think that was put out by Intel. And then there was from Google, their, I don't know what they call that group, but the group that responds to Google bugs, Project Zero, I think it's called. They have a fuzzer. So I think both of them probably allow you to restrict to write only correct programs. So but the issue is to actually make them work for Roland, there will be quite a bit of work to be done to be able to say, okay, this is now generating correct programs. I don't know if you want to process that now, but we can go over those links and read through and see how hard it would be. And my sense is that either a Roland fuzzer or a Yet Another Program Generator for Roland would take quite a bit of effort. So
I think in terms of the the BNF to generate valid programs, I think Gary has tools to do that already. Question is, what do these give him on top of that? What do these other tools give him on top of that? I mean, he already.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if Gary has the tools to write correct Roland programs, maybe that's the first thing. Let's use what we have without incurring a whole lot of development, tool development costs to say, okay, let's just have it generate the programs against either a node or a thing. The reason I was talking about dev test node is that seems like Kelly and team have a means of monitoring a test net and then making sense of what's going on in it behavior analysis wise. So if we do it on a similar thing, but allowing crashes, then they have access to that data and the same tool set that they're using on testnet to figure out what's going on with resources and behavior to be able to figure out how they want to improve things. Whereas if we run it on our own node, either we have to create all of that under their guidance, or there's not an easy way of communicating things to them.
Well, if we can get one thing to run usefully with random programs, and then we can get a node of 3 things to work reasonably, then we might need those other tools. But I think it's just it's not a given that we're going to get to the point where running these random programs is actually something we can analyze reasonably.
So how would you, what do you suggest is the pathway to, what's the step 1 that we can do to get to a point where we at least test either correct or incorrect programs on a single node?
I think I don't think we should, you know, create something of our own in the vacuum. I think we have to work with the dev team
Right.
to what framework they're creating, and then we have to develop test cases that fit into that framework.
Okay.
And whether
So-
we do that through random generation or something else doesn't matter really.
Okay. So in that list that you're talking about, because that's another bucket, Kelly already referred to the fact that Phil Strauch put out a document of games that you could play or write, and that's an initial set, because she's saying that they're not developing all of those, but if the community wants to develop any or all of them, that'll reduce their burden. So I think that's maybe an initial starting point where we try to do those games. And once we exhaust that, then we can look at maybe other things we need to do to see what happens.
I think every little prototype that we make is a test case that can go into.
Of course, yeah.
The thing here, and maybe we need to have a section on here or somewhere that has the current state on this that can where people can engage. What am I doing? Banging philosophers. That's not what I intended, but so there's lots of sources for examples that we can collect and categorize some things, and that becomes a list of stuff we can randomly stick down the, I mean, there's a few things, very specific test cases that I would like to run.
Okay.
We should have a way of preserving these and making a library of these so that we can, constantly, and I think ultimately a second network for this kind of testing is necessary. I think they already have one, sort of. They already run networks for this kind of testing.
Yeah, I would imagine the developers are using something different from in their integration testing. They must be using something like that as opposed to the existing testnet.
Right.
They're using White Block.
Well, White Block is, they're using White Block, but they're also using their own dev test network.
Okay.
Well, they have the dev network, and I know they've run stuff for running certain tests, whatever. Because they don't want to bring down testnet.
Right.
Right. Yeah, the testnet is supposed to be available for dApp developers. That's the reason why we can't break it. But there either already is another one that we can keep hitting against, or maybe they
pretty much build it on an as needed basis right now.
Okay.
But if we're prepared to do testing, I'm sure they'll run it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, my main concern my main point about that is that whatever tests we run, the process should not be too complicated and manual for them to make sense of. The entire tool suite that they have to be able to analyze heaps and logs and memory heaps and logs and whatever else that they want to do, they should be able to use it very smoothly. Otherwise, it'll be like two different worlds, and whatever we have run really would not get on their priority, or would not be resolved or even looked at to say, is this a priority or not? So,
right. And this is why they run their suites of tests now. We want to fit right into that so that our tests run right along with their tests.
Right. And that's what Kelly was asking for. That's what she was saying with this set of games that Phil has identified. She was saying that, they're doing some, but if we can do some more, that would help. So that could be a starting point.
Rao, could you look for that link or that resource that Phil posted and put it in the dApp developers channel?
Okay.
And
The dApp developers channel in Discord, or you're talking about on this Rolang wiki? I guess it points to the same thing. I don't know.
yeah, so for right now, in the Colab Discord, there's the dApp developers channel, and that's where from earlier we're going to put all of our resources that we use in that channel.
Okay.
And then so this would be another resource.
Okay, so let me explain to you. I have the link in a private message from Kelly in my Discord, but last I checked, I didn't have the permissions. She may, or maybe I do. I'll check that because it needs permissions. It's not an open to public kind of a thing, I think.
Okay.
But I will post the link, and then what we can do is whoever is going to access that can ask for permissions on it or something.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think it should be probably a little bit more public than it is right now.
So, but this is the link of the games that Phil posted.
Right. Basically, Phil worked on Ethereum's hardening in the past, and he basically reapplied that or modified that for Rolang and created a document.
Okay.
And the dev team is using that as a guide for what they need to, the test cases that they're going to develop.
Okay. That was helpful. So what we can do, if you put it, so in Discord, Colab Discord on the dApp developers channel, I'll add that to the agenda for next week. So if everyone else sees it, you can go and check it out and see if we have access or not. But next time we meet, I'll have it on the agenda so we can kind of discuss it and maybe even bring it up and just kind of talk about it, get feedback and review it and continue working on our going forward plan. How does that sound?
Right. Sounds
okay. Good. Anybody else have any comments or thoughts? All right. Well, I thought this was a good session. So, and I'll update our agenda. It'll say agenda and notes as well. So, great. Well, thanks everyone. So enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll be talking soon.
Later.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Have a good day.
See you later. Yep. Bye.